It was supposed to be just another Thanksgiving dinner. A warm picture. Perfect evening with too much food, polite laughter, and a few stories retold for the 100th time. But the moment I stepped into my mother-in-law's grand, overly decorated Connecticut home, I knew I'd made a mistake thinking this year would be different. The cinnamon's sweet air, the carefully placed candles, the meticulously arranged centerpieces. All of it was just a facade. The real tradition at this dinner wasn't gratitude. It was humiliation. The moment we walked in, I could feel it. The shift in the room. The silent, suffocating acknowledgement that I was once again the outsider. David, my husband of 6 years, was greeted with warm hugs and loud laughter by his mother Evelyn and his sisters, Nicole and Rachel. The holy trinity of exclusion. When they turned to me, it was with cold, obligatory smiles that didn't reach their eyes. Evelyn barely looked at me, before turning away like I wasn't even there. I told myself to breathe, to get through it, to smile and survive it like I had every year before. I nodded politely through dinner as Evelyn praised Nicole's latest promotion and Rachel's new house. Not one word directed my way. Not a single moment of acknowledgement. I chewed my food and swallowed my pride. David, as always, didn't notice, or pretended not to. But I was used to it. I'd learned how to hide the sting behind a well-practiced smile. I'd perfected the art of invisibility. Still, a part of me hoped, foolishly, that this year they'd try. That maybe, just maybe, they'd treat me like part of the family. Then came the moment. Just after dinner, before dessert, Evelyn clapped her hands and announced, "We have a little Thanksgiving surprise." The annual gift-giving performance. Evelyn loved this part. It was her moment, the generous matriarch, showering her family with carefully curated presents, all for show. One by one, she handed out extravagant gifts. A designer bag for Nicole. A luxury spa voucher for Rachel. An aged bottle of bourbon for David. Even the kids received shiny new toys. Everyone got something. Everyone? Except me? Evelyn turned to me, her eyes glittering with amusement. "Oh," she said, voice dripping with fox sweetness. "We just forgot about you." Laughter erupted. Nicole chuckled. Rachel giggled behind her hand. And the worst part, David laughed too. My own husband. The man who'd watched me be treated like furniture for years. Laughing, like it was a harmless joke. I felt something hard and cold click inside me. Something sharp. Something final. I looked at them, smiling, but not with warmth. It was the kind of smile you give right before the ground shifts. "That's okay," I said softly, reaching into my bag. "I didn't forget about you." The room fell quiet. I pulled out a small, neatly wrapped box and handed it to Evelyn. Her expression faltered. She glanced at David, confused, then slowly unwrapped it. Inside was a thick stack of documents, nothing fancy, just plain paper. Until she read the first page, her smile disappeared. And in that silence, that thick, sudden silence, I watched her world begin to unravel. Let them laugh, I thought. Because they wouldn't be laughing for long. Evelyn's fingers trembled as she peeled back the rest of the wrapping paper. She pulled the documents from the box, confusion twisting her perfectly made, up face. Then she read the first page. Her eyes flicked across the words, and I saw it. The exact moment she realized what she was holding. The color drained from her face. Her hands shook. She flipped to the next page, then the next. Nicole leaned over her shoulder. Rachel followed, their smiles fading with every word they read. No one said a thing. Not a breath. Not a whisper. Just the soft, rapid flutter of paper being turned, and the rising sound of Evelyn's panic. I watched them closely, letting the silence stretch, letting it settle into their bones. They weren't sure what they were looking at yet. Not completely. But they could feel it. They knew something was coming. And it was bigger than a forgotten gift. "What is this?" Evelyn finally asked, her voice barely audible. I took a slow sip of my wine. "Oh," I said, meeting her eyes. "Just some light reading I've been working on. You know, since I had all that extra time while you were too busy pretending I didn't exist." She clutched the papers tighter, her hands pale and unsteady. Her husband, Richard, who had been silently watching from across the table, stepped forward and snatched the documents from her grip. He read a few lines, then turned to her, face darkening. "Evelyn," he said quietly, "what the hell is this?" Nicole leaned in again, flipping through the pages faster now. "Mom," Are these tax documents? Rachel's voice wavered. Why are there account numbers from Dad's portfolio in here? Evelyn was unraveling in real time. Her mask, the polished, controlling matriarch, was slipping fast. She opened her mouth, closed it, then tried to compose herself. This is fake, she snapped, voice sharp. She made this up. I didn't move. I didn't flinch. I just smiled. You're welcome to think that, I said. But the IRS won't. The silence cracked. Nicole stared at Evelyn, eyes wide and horrified. Rachel's fingers trembled as she flipped to the final page. The one with the full breakdown of Evelyn's fraudulent filings, asset transfers, and underreported income. Mom, she said. Voice breaking? This is real. These are your tax forms. Evelyn's facade shattered. You set me up, she hissed, pointing at me with a shaking hand. You ungrateful little? No. I cut in, steady and calm. You set yourself up. You just never thought someone like me was paying attention. Richard's face had turned a sickly gray. His lips parted as he tried to process what he was reading. How much trouble is she in? He asked quietly. I tilted my head. Depends. If she starts fixing things now, maybe just a fine. But if they dig deeper, well, you know how thorough federal audits can be. He looked at Evelyn like he didn't even recognize her anymore. Nicole and Rachel weren't saying anything now? Just scanning the pages again and again, connecting dots they'd never questioned before, and then came the final blow. Nicole looked up slowly, her face pale. Why are there withdrawals labeled personal expenses from Dad's investment account? Rachel turned the page. And why are there transfers from the business account into a separate one under your name, not registered to the company? Evelyn froze. Richard's voice cracked. You stole from me? Everything in the room seemed to stop. Evelyn opened her mouth to speak, but nothing came out. Nicole stared at her in disgust. Rachel's eyes brimmed with fury. You told me you couldn't help when I needed a loan last year. Rachel whispered. You said there was nothing you could do. You said we were broke. Nicole added, her voice rising. And all this time, you were hiding money. Richard turned to her, eyes burning. You drained my retirement, Evelyn. I stood still, heart pounding, watching everything I'd buried for years come crashing to the surface in one breathtaking, shattering moment. Evelyn's empire of lies was crumbling. And I hadn't even touched the match yet. She had lit the fire herself. I'd only handed her the mirror. Richard's face was ghostly white. His hands trembled as he held the documents, eyes darting over every damning line. He looked up at Evelyn like he was seeing a stranger. You emptied my retirement account, he said, barely above a whisper. The room went silent, not out of respect, but disbelief. Shock clung to the air like smoke. Nicole's jaw dropped. You what? Her voice cracked as she snatched the last page from her father's hands, confirming it for herself. Rachel just stood there frozen, trying to grasp the magnitude of what they were witnessing. Evelyn's lips moved, but no sound came out. For once, the woman who always had something sharp to say had no words at all. She reached out, almost instinctively, toward Richard, but he stepped back like her touch was fire. I worked my whole damn life for that money, he said, louder now, pain spilling into his voice. 35 years of sacrifice, and you stole it? You don't understand? Evelyn snapped, her voice suddenly shrill, desperate. I was going to fix it. I was handling everything? No, I said, cutting through her excuse like a blade. You weren't handling anything. You were covering your tracks and hoping no one would ever notice. Nicole's voice was shaking. How long has this been going on? Rachel flipped back through the pages, eyes narrowing. Look at this transfer date. This wasn't recent. She's been lying for years. Evelyn's eyes were wild now, searching the room for someone, anyone, to defend her. And like clockwork, she turned to David. Her voice softened, that performative maternal sweetness seeping back in. David, sweetheart, you don't believe this, do you? He hesitated. I saw it happen. That split, second flicker of doubt crossing his face. The war between loyalty and logic playing out right in front of everyone. Evelyn clung to it, pressing on. They're turning you against me, she said. You know I'd never hurt this family. But David's gaze didn't move to her. It moved to me. His expression was unreadable, but I could feel the weight of everything unsaid behind his eyes. He wasn't looking for comfort. He was searching for clarity, and when he finally spoke, his voice was cold and hollow. "Did you steal from Dad?" Evelyn flinched like he'd slapped her. "Answer me?" he said again, louder now, anger creeping in. "Did you take his money?" Her silence said more than words ever could. David's shoulders dropped, the last ounce of denial draining from his face. He turned away, jaw clenched, refusing to meet anyone's eyes. And just like that, the bond between them, the blind, unshakable loyalty she had always relied on, broke. Nicole stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. She grabbed the rest of the documents and shoved them into Richard's hands. "We're done," she said. "This is over." Rachel nodded without hesitation. "We're cutting her off." Evelyn's head snapped up, panic written all over her face. "You can't do that. I'm your mother. You stopped being that the second you started stealing from us," Rachel said, her voice cold and final. And then it happened. Richard staggered. His face twisted, his hand flew to his chest. In a second, everything turned to chaos. He collapsed, gasping, and the room erupted in screams. David lunged toward him, yelling his name. Nicole and Rachel dropped to their knees, trying to keep him conscious. Evelyn stood frozen for a beat before breaking into a frantic sob, hands fluttering helplessly in the air. I was already on the phone, my voice steady despite the storm around me. "We need an ambulance. Now." As I gave the address, I watched Evelyn, watched her crumble in real time. But there was something hollow about it, something performative. Her cries were loud, but her hands didn't touch her husband. She didn't hold him. She didn't whisper his name or try to calm him. She just stood there, a woman who had spent her entire life pretending to care, now faced with the consequences of being exposed. And I knew right then, this wasn't over. It was just beginning. The ambulance lights cast sharp red flashes across the perfect walls of Evelyn's living room. The once pristine scene now looked like the aftermath of a war zone. Documents scattered across the floor, chairs pushed back in haste, voices still trembling in the wake of what had just happened. Richard lay unconscious on a stretcher, oxygen mask pressed to his face, his hand loosely held by David, who sat beside him in stunned silence. Evelyn was pacing the hallway, dabbing at dry eyes with a tissue, her sobs loud and dramatic. But even through her wailing, one thing was painfully clear. She wasn't grieving. She was performing. Not once had she knelt beside the man she claimed to love. Not once had she tried to comfort him. Her sorrow was for the show, for the image, for the illusion that was already slipping through her fingers. At the hospital, the silence grew heavier. We sat in stiff plastic chairs under fluorescent lights while nurses moved like ghosts in the background. Nicole kept tapping her foot, jaw clenched. Rachel sat motionless, staring at the floor, lost in thought. David hadn't spoken a word since we arrived. It was Sharon who finally broke the silence, her voice raw and low. "What the hell were you thinking, Mom?" Evelyn looked up sharply, blinking like she couldn't believe her own daughter would dare question her. "I didn't mean for any of this to happen," she said, voice trembling with practiced regret. "I was going to fix it. You stole from Dad," Rachel snapped, eyes narrowing. "You stole from all of us. You don't understand." "No," Nicole cut her off, voice rising. "You don't get to play the victim now. You lied to our faces for years." Evelyn turned to David again, desperation seeping through every word. "David, sweetheart, you don't really think I did this to hurt anyone, do you?" That's when David looked at me. Not his mother. Me, and his question came like a punch to the chest. "Was this your plan all along?" he asked. "Did you do this to destroy my family?" I stared at him, my heart thudding in disbelief. He wasn't blaming her. He was blaming me. After everything, after all the lies, all the theft, all the silence, I was the villain in his eyes. Evelyn's shoulders eased. She could feel it, the tide turning back in her favor. She moved closer to him, laid a gentle hand on his arm, voice dripping with softness. "You've always been the only one who truly understood me." And David let her. He didn't pull away. That was the moment I felt everything inside me go still. I had spent 6 years waiting for this man to choose me, to defend me, to stand up for me. And when the curtain finally fell and the truth stood naked in front of him, He still chose her. I stood slowly, calm and cold. Evelyn's eyes flicked to me, her expression smug, as if she believed she'd won. I met her gaze, smiled faintly, and then I laughed. A sharp, bitter laugh that sliced through the room like glass. "What's so funny?" she asked, eyes narrowing. "You are," I said. "You think this is over, that you've won. But all you've done is prove everything I already knew." David stood, reaching for my arm. "Just stop, okay?" I yanked my arm free. "No, David, you stop. Stop pretending you didn't see this coming. Stop acting like I'm the one who brought this house down when your mother was already burning it from the inside out." He opened his mouth to speak, but I didn't give him the chance. "For 6 years, you let them treat me like garbage. You let them humiliate me, exclude me, erase me. And the second I push back, I'm the problem." His jaw clenched. "It's not that simple." "Yes, it is," I said, steady and sure. "You never stood by me. Not once. And I'm done waiting for you to start." I reached into my pocket, pulled off my wedding ring, and placed it in his hand. His eyes widened, but I didn't hesitate. "I'm leaving," Evelyn gasped. "Oh, don't be so dramatic." I turned back to her with a sharp smile. "Dramatic? I just tore your perfect little world apart in under an hour. No one stopped me. Not David. Not Evelyn. Not even her daughters." I walked out, leaving behind the mess they'd built, the lies they'd lived, and the man who never once chose me. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like the outsider anymore. I felt free. I walked away that night without looking back. I didn't need to. The damage was done, and they all knew it. Evelyn had lost her grip. Richard had uncovered the betrayal of a lifetime. And David? David had chosen silence over truth. I didn't need anyone's permission to reclaim my dignity. I had already taken it. Days passed in a blur. I didn't answer any messages, didn't take any calls. I wasn't interested in apologies wrapped in guilt or explanations soaked in regret. I didn't want to hear how David finally understood. He'd had 6 years to understand. He chose not to. That was enough for me. But predictably, the messages came anyway. David texted first, vague and hesitant. Then he called, then called again. I didn't respond. I didn't owe him closure. He wasn't reaching out because he missed me. He was reaching out because everything he thought was solid had finally cracked, and now he wanted someone to help hold the pieces together. But I wasn't that person anymore. Then came the message I'd been expecting. Just one sentence. "I see it now. I should have stood by you." I stared at it for a few seconds, not because it moved me, but because it was so tragically predictable. He didn't fight for me when it counted. He didn't defend me when it was hard. And now that the dust had settled, he wanted to rewrite the story. But I'd already closed that chapter. Evelyn, too, tried to regain control, but not with me. She tried to salvage her image, to manipulate Nicole and Rachel into believing she hadn't meant to hurt anyone. She played the martyr, the misunderstood mother who'd made a few bad choices for the sake of the family. But her daughters weren't buying it anymore. The numbers didn't lie. The bank statements didn't lie. And most importantly, Richard didn't lie. When he recovered, he didn't hesitate. He filed for divorce. Everything Evelyn had spent years building, the facade of control, the illusion of generosity, the carefully curated role of family matriarch, crumbled beneath her. Her reputation shattered. Her marriage ended. Her daughters stopped returning her calls. Her friends, the ones who used to praise her dinner parties and envy her lifestyle, disappeared the moment the truth came out. And David? He was left standing in the wreckage, unsure whether to mourn what he lost or resent what he never had the strength to protect. He reached out again, left a voicemail this time. His voice sounded tired, broken, unsure. He said he finally realized what I had endured, how much I had given, how blind he had been. But by then, I was already gone. I had changed my number. I had packed my things. I had moved on. Because the truth is, I never needed them to choose me. I just needed to choose myself. And I did. The silence in my new apartment was different. It wasn't empty or heavy like the silence I used to feel in Evelyn's house. It was clean, quiet, and mine. No one watching me from across the room with thinly veiled contempt. No one pretending I didn't exist. No one laughing at my expense while calling it family tradition. Just peace. But even in that peace, The echoes of that final night still came back in fragments. Evelyn's face, twisted with rage and fear as her world unraveled. Nicole's voice cracking with betrayal. Rachel's stunned silence. And David, the man who once held my hand in promises, but never once held my voice in a room full of knives. Standing frozen, not knowing who to protect anymore. Or maybe he did know, and just couldn't face what it said about him. When the divorce papers hit Evelyn's doorstep, the fallout spread like wildfire. Richard didn't hold back. The man who'd once stood quietly behind his wife was suddenly louder than anyone. He wasn't just divorcing her, he was exposing her. Friends, neighbors, business partners. Everyone knew. The catering empire she'd built on lies and manipulation collapsed within weeks. Clients backed out. Investigators circled. Her name, once spoken with admiration in Connecticut social circles, became a whispered warning. Nicole and Rachel stayed away. They didn't visit. They didn't call. Evelyn sent letters, emails, even voicemail after voicemail, begging for forgiveness, begging for understanding. Clinging to the only identity she had left. Mother. But nothing she said could erase the fact that she'd stolen from the very people she claimed to protect. Her daughters didn't need an apology. They needed distance. And David kept trying. He sent messages that grew longer, more desperate. He said he was sorry. That he'd been blind. That he wished he'd spoken up, defended me, seen things sooner. He said all the things I used to pray for, years ago, when I still believed he might become the kind of man who stood beside me instead of behind them. But he said it too late. I didn't respond. Not out of cruelty, but because there was nothing left to say. He hadn't just let them hurt me. He'd stood in the room while they did it, laughed with them, and called it harmless. He hadn't just failed me as a husband. He'd failed himself as a man. And maybe the most brutal part of all wasn't the betrayal, or the silence, or the loneliness I endured for 6 years. It was realizing that I had spent so much of my life waiting for someone to value me, when I should have been valuing myself. I gave them grace, patience, time, and understanding. But I never gave those things to myself. Not until that night. Not until I stood in that room and burned every lie they'd built to the ground. I didn't destroy that family. I just pulled the curtains back and let them see what was already there. And now, every time I wake up in this new space, every time I sip my morning coffee without someone belittling me from across the table, I remember one thing with absolute clarity. I didn't lose a family. I escaped one. They say time brings clarity, but some truths don't need time. Some truths hit like lightning, fast, sharp, and final. And mine came the moment I realized I hadn't just walked away from a toxic family. I had survived it. Word spread quickly after I left. People who had once sat at Evelyn's table, sipping her wine and praising her catering, now whispered about fraud, betrayal, and stolen retirement funds. She tried to contain the damage, tried to rewrite the story, but no one bought it. Her business collapsed under the weight of her lies, clients vanished, and creditors came knocking. What she had spent years crafting with fake smiles and meticulous deception turned to ash almost overnight. But what struck deeper than her financial downfall was her social one. Evelyn didn't know how to exist without admiration. She fed on it. And now the only thing people offered her was distance. Her carefully controlled image, the elegant, generous matriarch, was shattered beyond repair. The same friends who once hung on her every word now avoided her at the grocery store. Richard didn't waste time. He moved out. Quietly, decisively. He filed for divorce and cut all financial ties. He gave statements, hired investigators, and made it clear to everyone that he'd been betrayed just as much as the rest of us. Evelyn tried to fight it, but for once, no one stood with her. Not her husband, not her daughters, not even David. Nicole and Rachel remained distant. But I heard from mutual acquaintances that they'd started therapy, both of them trying to piece together how much of their childhood had been shaped by their mother's manipulation. It was something I had suspected for years but never dared say aloud. Evelyn hadn't just alienated me. She'd raised daughters to accept emotional abuse wrapped in silk and silver platters. And David, he tried. He really tried. I saw the shift in him. The messages became longer, more apologetic. He said he finally saw everything. How his mother used him. How he let me stand alone in rooms where he should have stood beside me. He said he was sorry for laughing when I was hurt, for staying silent when I needed him loud, for treating me like I was overreacting when I was only surviving. But guilt isn't love. Regret isn't loyalty. And hindsight doesn't heal a heart that's already learned to beat without you. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Because the lesson wasn't about revenge or punishment. It wasn't about watching Evelyn fall or seeing David beg. It was about finally understanding that I had never been powerless. I had never been voiceless. I had just been quiet for too long, hoping kindness would earn me respect in a house built on cruelty. When I look back now, I don't see a woman who broke a family. I see a woman who lit a match in a house full of gas leaks, and let the truth do what truth always does. It burns. Looking back, everything that unfolded wasn't just a story about a broken family or a bitter Thanksgiving dinner. It was the awakening of a woman who had spent 6 years being silenced, dismissed, and erased. Through years of subtle cruelty, exclusion, and passive neglect, she endured in silence, hoping that love alone would bridge the distance between her and the family that never saw her as one of their own. But that silence ended the moment she chose herself. With one box of truth, she dismantled the illusion of a perfect family and forced them to see the rot they had ignored. Her strength wasn't in revenge. It was in reclaiming her voice, her worth, and walking away from people who refused to see it. She didn't destroy a family. She simply refused to let herself be destroyed by it. And in the end, it wasn't about making them pay. It was about choosing peace over pain, dignity over tolerance, and truth over comfort. The lesson is simple yet profound: your silence will never protect you. When respect is constantly denied, when love comes with conditions, and when loyalty is one-sided, the bravest thing you can do is leave. Choosing yourself isn't selfish, it's survival. And it's a choice you never need permission to make.